The Pickleball pros are the very best in the game, and they've been giving out some key pointers that we should be adding to our own game.
You guys liked this recently, so we're bringing it back for 7 more. Subscribe, it helps us out a lot. Let's do this. The first trick comes from the mind of Tyson McGuffin, and that is don't dig for trash. You have way more time than you think. So this mainly applies on the 4th shot. So that means that someone served, we returned, they hit their 3rd shot, now it's our time to hit a 4th shot. If our opponents hit a really good drop or just a shot that lands kind of shallower in the kitchen, a lot of intermediate players have a tendency to want to reach out and take that, what Tyson's calling trash. And the problem with this, well, there's really 2. Number 1, when you're this far extended and you're hitting below the net, there's really only 2 things you can do. Number 1, you can hit it high and hard. And if I hit it too hard, then my opponents coming up are going to have an easy chance to put that ball away. And the second thing, if I'm reaching here, I could hit it really soft. And then by hitting it soft, I'm just letting my opponents come all the way up to the kitchen and I'm not applying any pressure to them. So what Tyson is saying is that you have way more time than you think. Rather than extending so far out here, just take a step back, let the ball bounce, and then hit a speed up from this position after the ball's already bounced so you can be more aggressive towards your opponents. A good rule of thumb here to know when you are taking trash out of the air is if your arm is completely extended. If you ever find yourself with no bend in your elbow, you're probably reaching too far. Generally, you want to be hitting balls that are in this imaginary bubble right in front of your body. So to do that, you're gonna have your elbows slightly bent, and then any ball here or here, you can take out of the air. But if you go past that bubble, you usually just wanna take a step back and then hit that ball. On a more advanced note, you want to have really clean footwork here because it's really important. If you're not balanced, you can't hit an effective shot. So when you're reaching back, it's important if you're hitting a forehand shot as a right-handed player, you take your left foot back first to establish this balance underneath you, and then a right foot back and then hit the ball. One of my coaches taught it to me as if you had a 300-pound barbell on your back. You wouldn't take your right foot and move it out because then you'd fall over. You would take your left foot and then your right foot so you're balanced the entire time. Same thing applies here. Ball's coming to me. I want to quickly shuffle back, hit the ball, get back up there.
Up next, we've got some words of wisdom from a pro coach, Mark Price. He knows a lot about the game, and he specifically recently talked about 4th shots, and that kind of ties into what we just touched on with Tyson McGuffin, so let's expand on it with Mark's advice. 4th shots in pickleball are incredibly crucial because it's our time to maintain offense, especially right after the return when we've already gotten our way to the kitchen. This is the offensive pressure in pickleball, and we've got to maintain it. His big advice is about being more automatic in your shot selection when we have balls that fly into that bubble that we just mentioned that Tyson discussed. So let's talk about picking the right shot depending on the ball that's coming over the net. The first option that you need to master in pickleball is whenever someone hits a drop that's good enough that your contact point is going to be below the net line. Let's say the net line's right here, and the ball is now lower than that when we have to make contact. When this is the case and you're hitting a 4th shot, you're absolutely forced to hit upward on the ball in order for it to go back over the net. And typically, if we also want to maintain some pressure on our opponents, we'd like to hit that ball at their feet with a little bit of power so they're forced to stay back and not get to the kitchen line as fast as usual. The way to do that is to execute a roll. We want to brush up on the backside of the ball, create a lot of topspin, so this ball is going to roll at our opponent's feet on the other side of the court. Topspin here is crucial because otherwise when we're adding pace, the ball is simply going to fly out if we do not create spin. So one of the main problems we see in intermediate players is they don't hit with topspin, they just push the ball and it goes out of bounds. We need to be rolling off the backside of the ball, and that creates that spin that allows us to attack these kinds of shots. So the rule is very simple. If the ball is below the net line, we're going to hit our roll. Let's talk about what happens when the ball is right at the net line. This is that kind of in-between zone, and we need a different response that's just as automatic. This is what Mark says we should be doing. In this case, when the ball is at the net line, we have just enough margin that we can start to attack with a bit more force. That's where we're going to introduce a topspin drive instead of a topspin drop. From this angle, we don't necessarily need quite as much topspin as we do with a roll. We don't have to hit quite as upward since we have more margin. So instead, we're going to drive the ball with a bit of spin, using our swing motion to create that topspin for us as we follow through with a bit more consistency and a bit more in a drive motion. The key here though, I still like to keep my swing compact because we expect our opponent to get the ball right back and we need to snap back to ready position. So for this swing, it's not quite as much upward motion as with the roll, but it's still an in-between ground where we're following through high That way we're still creating a bit of topspin that we can use to keep the ball in the court as we drive through with our motion. The key here we want to distinguish is our contact point on the ball. When you're hitting a roll, you're really aiming for the underside of the ball. That way we create the most amount of spin and are able to arc it with a motion that lands back on our opponent's side of the court. But with this kind of topspin drive, we're really looking for kind of an in-between point, not all the way at the side, but not all the way at the bottom. We're looking for this in-between. That way we're still creating a decent amount of spin, but we're also adding more pace for the ball because we have more margin to attack just a bit flatter. So if you want to visualize one thing, think about this section of the ball, aim for it, and then add pace. And now you can hit topspin drive. Now, finally, that brings us to the third thing we should have automatically down. When the ball is in that happy place where it is above the net, we have full range to hit a more powerful shot and really be aggressive towards our opponent. So if the ball is above the net line, you have a new option where you can hit a drive that has less upward motion and more side spin that hits down at our opponent's feet. Depending on how high the ball is, you can even start to hit completely downward with no spin at all. But in general, we want to add just enough without going upward. That way we create pace and hit down back at the ball. This is the optimal zone we want to be looking to attack our opponents on because we finally have margin to hit down at their feet. Again, just to visualize, this time we're hitting on the side of the ball because we don't need as much topspin and we're able to make contact downward right back at our opponents. It's kind of a side spin shot, and if you're tall enough like me, sometimes I'll even reach really far and actually hit completely downwards. It just depends on how high the ball is and how far your reach is. But in general, we're looking for that side spin shot that has less upward motion and more follow through across the body.
Our next tip comes from one of the best female players in the world, Anna Bright, and it's about how to disguise your lobs. A lob shot can be very effective if you hit it at the correct time, but if you hit it at the wrong time, then you're going to get punished for it. So let's show you exactly when to hit the lob and how to do it. A lob shot is really only effective in one of two scenarios. Number one, if your opponent has a really poor overhead, then it doesn't matter when you hit a lob to them, they're just not going to be able to handle it very well. And the number two scenario where it is effective is if they're not expecting it at all. But for them to not expect it, you have to earn that right. And the way to earn it is by disguising it. So first we'll talk about a volley lob. So this is a lob where somebody hits a ball to me and I take it out of the air and then I lob it back over them. This is definitely the more difficult of the two lobs you can hit, but it can be really effective if you do it right. So first, to set this lob up, you want to be hitting some volley dinks, meaning that if you're in a dinking rally with your opponents and they're targeting you, try to take a couple out of the air like this. And then on the third shot they hit to you, then you want to have that exact same look, but now you just add a little more pop to it and hit it right over top of them. And of course, the same thing applies if you're hitting an off the bounce lob. Just wait until you're in a dinking rally. They hit a couple of shots to you, it bounces, you hit it back to them, it bounces, you hit it back to them. And then on the third time, it bounces and you hit it over their heads. Now they're not expecting it because you have them in a pattern. Now, once you've set up the pattern so that you can then disguise your lob, you also have to choose where to hit your lob. And you really have two options. Number one is to target one of your opponent's backhands. So generally the backhand is weaker because this kind of overhead is a lot more unnatural than this kind of overhead. So if you can go over the backhand, it's usually better. However, if you go straight down the line over your opponent's backhand, you don't have a tremendous amount of space to work with. You're going to have a lot more space if you go cross court with it. But the problem with going cross court is you're always going to be going over somebody's forehand. So with that being said, it's really important when choosing to do a cross-court lob that you're making sure the person in front of you is not crowding that middle line so you can go over the backhand of their partner. Once again, this is probably the shot in pickleball where shot selection is the most important thing. So make sure you're doing it at the right time so that you and your partner have success and they don't hate you.
Our next tip we can steal from the pros comes from Simone Jardim. This was actually Ben Johns, the #1 male in the world. This was his mixed partner before Annalie Waters took over. So this girl really knows what she's talking about. And she recently just gave a dinking masterclass. Here's some of the key highlights that you should know. The first thing she mentions all the time is that our body should be lateral to the net when we are dinking. We never want to be turning to our side. This might feel more natural if you're coming from tennis, that you always want to be turned to your side. But in pickleball, we always want to strike the ball out in front of us and hold our ground. And this also allows us to quickly shuffle to our side as long as we're staying low. So the easiest thing to remember is when you're up at the kitchen, chest forward, facing the net. There's also one big trick here. We always want to avoid crossing our legs. This is just not necessary in doubles and is not something that's going to allow us to reach the ball faster and recover quick. So if you're able, the simple solution when you're reaching for a ball is to shuffle, bring your right foot to your left foot or your left foot to your right foot, and move over. The reason we do that is it keeps us incredibly stable and allows us to always keep our paddle out in front, allowing us to either volley dink or hit a dink from any position while maintaining our ground up at the kitchen line. So stability is key, chest forward, shuffle left and right. The next big thing that she mentions is we want to keep our paddle forward at all times. That way we're always hitting contact out in front of our body. I kind of just touched on that, but let me give you a bit more detail. The easiest way to know if your paddle is out as far as it should be is it should be within your line of sight when you're going for the shot or reading the play. So at all times, I want to be seeing the top half of my paddle when I'm at the kitchen line, because this signals to me that, hey, my paddle is in the right spot for me to be holding my ground and potentially taking balls more aggressively. The next big thing I like to do to add on to this, and also to keep myself engaged during a dink rally, which at times can lose my attention, is I like to track the ball with the tip of my paddle at all moments. So if the ball is on the other side of the court, point my paddle towards the ball at all times. That way I'm generally even more ready. It also gives me something important to focus on, so I'm staying active and engaged in the rally at all times. Also a big benefit, it kind of preps your paddle in the right position in case they speed up. But the big rule we're focusing on is paddle out in front, clearly visible, allowing us to take balls early and catch our opponents off guard while holding our ground. The third big point when it comes to professional dinking is we're not dinking just to stay in the rally. We've got to do it with intention. A lot of players, especially at the intermediate level, like to dink simply and soft, so they're just trying to get the ball back into their opponent's kitchen and stay in the rally. And while that's effective for consistency, it doesn't put any pressure on our opponents or eventually bait out a pop-up, which allows us to finish the point with a potential speed up. So the way to stay more active and get your opponents on their toes is to be picking the right targets when you are dinking. There's two simple ways that I like to focus on targets. One is patterns. I like to hit, for instance, to my opponent's forehand twice in a row, and then one to their backhand. That way they don't get too comfortable doing the exact same shot over and over again, and it keeps them moving around on the court, having to second guess what my next move is. So 2 forehand, 1 backhand is always a favorite of mine. Another big thing I like to do is simply look for a weakness in my opponents. If I notice that their forehand is weak, for some reason they're hitting higher dinks off of their forehand, then I'm going to hit almost every dink that I can to their forehand. That way I'm more likely to receive a pop-up when they go for that shot. You also might find this very common on an opponent's backhand. They may simply make errors or pop up the ball more often. So pick the right target and aim for it when you are dinking, rather than just staying in the rally just to stay in the rally. Always have a game plan. Always make your opponents do the work. Now that you know how to dink better, let's talk about another big advantage pros have, and that's actually their equipment. To be able to generate the power and spin that a pro does, you actually need a paddle that's capable of it. Thankfully, our friends at Enhance just launched their Gen 4 foam paddle, and this thing has it all. Foam is the way forward for pickleball paddles right now, and these guys have absolutely nailed the design. I've been playing with it a ton lately. It's got pro power and max spin, but honestly, the best part is that it's cheaper than other big brands selling foam paddles right now, especially when you use our discount code that we have special for you guys only. They've got a holiday special running right now, so this is usually $199.99. Right now it's $174.99.99, but with our code, you get another $20 off, making this $154.99. which is an absolute deal for this level of a paddle. Just use code CRACKED at checkout and you'll get that special discount applied. I suggest doing it quickly though, because once the holidays end, this deal will end as well. So check it out for yourself. We've got it linked down in the description for you. And now Shay will take it away with the next point.
Our next tip comes from Catherine Parento, and it covers one of the biggest things that doubles teams struggle with, which of course is the return of serve. Now on the return of serve, our goal is to try to prevent the serving team from making their way up to that kitchen line. And there's a couple of things that we can do to make their lives much more difficult. One of the most common problems is on a really big serve from the opposing team, it makes our partner have to stay back off of their return. And when they're in that position, having to stay back, a lot of people don't know how to react to that situation. But Catherine tells us what to do. If we are the partner that's not being pushed back, we just want to be able to step across and cover over this middle line. Basically, what we've done is take the amount of available court our opponents have to hit to, and we just decreased it by about half. And this does apply even if your backhand is in the middle, which Caleb will cover here in a little bit. Even in this scenario, you want to be able to step across and then have backhands right here. And then if you're on the other side of the court, you want to be able to step across and have forehands over here. But there's one thing that your partner can do to make your life a lot easier in this position, and that is return down the line. So just imagine this. If our opponent hit a really big serve and Caleb returned back to the person that hit it, what am I supposed to do? Well, if the ball is over there, I have to be able to cover my sideline. But now since I'm covering my sideline and Caleb is back, we have all of this court available for them. So it would make way more sense for Caleb to hit his return down his line, knowing it's a big serve, and then he's staying back. I have all the freedom in the world to come over here and take any ball out of the air. And then this cross-court shot to my corner is a much more difficult shot for them to hit. So to summarize this in a really succinct point, you can remember, if your opponent's hit a big serve, you want to be getting big in the middle of the court, taking over all that space.
Our next big tip that we can steal from the pros comes from Riley Newman. He says that the biggest myth in pickleball is that forehand should always take middle. This is kind of a common concept that we learn at the beginner and intermediate level. That way we're properly utilizing the strong forehand. But actually, once we get to the higher levels and even the pro levels, that concept needs to go out the window. In some ways, this kind of expands on what we just talked about in the last point, where you've got to cover your partner no matter what. There's some set rules that we can follow to make sure that the right person is hitting the ball to cover most of the court at a time. The rule is relatively simple. Whoever receives the ball cross court has priority. You might also know this or have heard of this as playing the X, but basically what it means is that when a ball goes cross court, the person on the opposite side has priority to hit the ball. This is important for several reasons, mainly being that it helps you defend the line, but also provides clarity to both sides on who should be going for what shot. Let's show you an example of what this kind of looks like in practice. Let's say Shay and I are in a dink rally cross court, and we've got partners on either side, but for now, just imagine that. We're dinking cross court. Shay decides for one reason or another that he would like to speed up. The moment Shay speeds up cross court, kind of over this middle area, my partner on my left side should leave this ball for me, and I take priority on the backhand in this case, because this is the most optimal way to cover most of the court in that scenario. When Shay is speeding up cross court, I receive the cross court ball, even though it's my backhand, and you might think my partner on his forehand should move over and cover. Let me explain the biggest reason why this guy, my partner in this case, won't move over and cover the X. The moment my partner leaves to move here, guess what Shay has open? It's a giant alley to my left. That's why we have to be playing the X or be playing the cross-court ball. If my partner shifts over, takes a ball, Shay is simply going to target the open window, and now we've given up an entire point. So those are the instances we're talking about when we say take the cross-court ball, even if it feels like it's not your forehand. So how do we implement this into our game better? The biggest thing I like to do is when I'm involved in a dink rally, I'm constantly watching the person across from me cross court in even more detail than I am the person just in front of me. That means staying extra involved when you're in a dink rally up at the kitchen, because the moment that person speeds up, anytime they're speeding up in my direction, I know I need to be shifting over and covering my partner who's got to be guarding their own line. So it's more of a mindset shift. Instead of just worrying about the person in front of you or potentially protecting speed ups to your backhand, we want to also be watching the person across and really covering for our own partner in those scenarios. But let's talk about what this means back at the baseline. Obviously, that's the biggest rule up at the kitchen, but when we're back here, I like to say this is where the rules can bend just a little bit. The reason why it's so crucial up at the kitchen line is because we need to give ourselves the most amount of reaction time since the rallies and volleys occur so fast. But when we're back at the baseline, we don't necessarily have to apply that principle in as much detail. For example, I consider myself to have a strong forehand. There's nothing wrong that if a return comes cross-court back at the baseline, for me agreeing with my partner's permission to come over, take the forehand, and I have enough time to shift back and cover my alley. But the mindset should still be there that even in those scenarios when you do decide to come over and use your strong forehand, you've got to immediately return to cover your alley. If I just hung out over here even after hitting a good forehand, I've still left this giant gap on the left side of the court that my opponent would be smart and hit to, forcing me to run back, hit a defensive shot, or just outright miss. So if you're going to move over at the baseline, I suggest recovering quickly and returning right back to your alley. But up at the kitchen, let your partner have the ball, or in general, let them have the ball all over the court. It's up to you and what your strengths are.
Our final tip comes from Zane Ford, and this is about hitting a forehand slice return. I'm sure you've seen this return before. It can be very effective, but a lot of people make this way more difficult than it has to be. Let's simplify it and show you a really effective return that you can implement in your game today. So Zane presented 3 main tips that you should be thinking about when hitting this shot. The first thing is he likes to grip a little bit higher on the paddle. That way he has a little bit more control of the paddle face itself. I think it's something that might be difficult to do in a game, going from down here where you typically are up to here. But if you're already up here, just something to keep in mind, this is probably a shot that you have more access to than other people. The second tip is on your contact, you don't want to be trying to add slice to the shot. There really isn't too much that you should be doing with your motion other than extending your arm and kind of like this throwing of your paddle motion. You're not trying to really chop down on the ball or go underneath it a lot. Just kind of extend forward and think about almost throwing your paddle like this. And the final thing is a big misconception, and that is most people tend to have their paddle face really open when they're hitting the slice. They try to get underneath it and really like add this spin to it, but it's more effective as paddle technology has gotten better to keep your paddle a little flatter, a little more closed, and then just push through the ball and let all the grit on the paddle do most of the work for you. If you're hitting this shot correctly, you're going to see it just kind of barely go over the top of the net, so it's a little bit less of a margin. But the good news is whenever it bounces, it stays incredibly low, so it's a really difficult shot for your opponents to hit a third shot drive on. So usually they have to be a little bit more defensive, and often people will pop this ball up if you hit it with enough spin.
Now you know 7 more tips we can steal from the pros and exactly how to put them into your game right now.
If you like that video, YouTube really thinks you're gonna like this one next.
Yep.
So you should click on it.
Do it.
And also, if that helped you, consider subscribing. It really helps us out a lot.
Don't consider, just do it. Don't even think about it.